Well, let me say welcome, everyone. This is Leadership Live. I'm your host, Doug Thorpe, and I've got a good friend. His name is Rich Hall. He's sitting in with me. Rich, how are you, man?
Hey, we're doing great, Doug. Glad to be here.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it. Yeah, folks. So this is a little bit of a maiden voyage. I have wanted to do this for a long time, and what it's about is opening the mic and offering some time online just to have a kind of a free coaching session. We'll talk about any hot topics, any questions you may have. We are live over on Facebook right now. So if you want to try to hop over there and jump in, feel free to do that. I'll monitor there to see if we get any other chats or activity. But for now, we're just going to kind of dive in. I've got a couple of thoughts and ideas I want to lead off with to kind of get things going. Part of what I'll do with this format is I will bring some topics and ideas that come out of my own coaching and business advisory work. There are obviously things that are on the minds of business leaders of all types. We've got a lot of things going on in the world around us, so we're going to talk a little bit about that. And Rich and I'll just kind of play off each other and bounce some ideas back and forth. And if you've got a comment, just jot it in the notes and or over on Facebook, where we are streaming live there as well. So, what I thought I wanted to do, Rich, is to lead off with a thought. You know, we just turned the page on a new year, 2023. And there's a lot of talk. It's kind of tradition. People think in terms of some New Year's resolutions and ideas of things they want to change or do. And I'll just say in a word, some time ago, I got disenchanted by the idea of New Year's resolutions in the traditional sense. You know, make a list like, okay, I'm going to lose 20 pounds, or I'm going to write a book, or I'm going to take a trip somewhere, that sort of thing. There's not anything wrong with that, but a lot of studies have told us that there's really not much sticking power in that kind of idea just in and of itself. And let me just, before I get too much further along, Rich, let me ask, what's your take? I mean, if you disagree, tell me so, but what do you think?
I think resolutions are, a lot of times they're emotional, without maybe it's encouragement, but it doesn't have stickiness. It doesn't have follow through, for the most part. And, the bad part is a lot of people that don't have more of what I'd call a formal type planning process. What are we going to accomplish for the year? Where are we at today? Where do we want to be? They'll turn that around and say, hey, we had a good year. Here's our resolutions, both personally and for the business. And, then real life happens, right?
Right.
What's that saying? Everybody's got a plan till you get punched in the face.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a lot to do with like resolution. So I'm not a big fan myself.
Yeah. So you touched on the key of where I was going with my thought on that. I think it is very important to develop a discipline of doing some assessment and reevaluation and some planning around all of that. And yes, it's a good time to do it at the end of one year and the start of another. And hopefully, in terms of just the turning the page on the calendar, maybe you've done your planning before you get to January 1st. So if, especially in a business sense, if you've got some things you need to get started, you'll have that underway. But as I was kind of putting these notes together, I thought to myself, what I really want to talk about is more of the personal planning and evaluation part, not so much business, although we can talk about the business part of it. But I just coincidentally earlier today, I recorded 2 different episodes of my podcast. And coincidentally, one of the topics that came up was the idea, if you're going to be a leader, the first person you need to worry about leading is yourself. Whatever disciplines or changes you need to make to be a better leader and be able to show up with more effectiveness and more impact, that starts with asking the tough questions of yourself. And, it's the classic stand up and look in the mirror. What do you see and what do you want to do different? So, in the spirit of the New Year resolution thing, I think it's always powerful to have a process of some sort where you do go through a series of questions and you ask yourself, what am I doing now that's working well? What did I do last year that didn't work so well? Have I spent time and money doing something that's not producing good outcome? And more importantly, have I created a behavior or a habit that's not productive and it's not getting me to where I want to be?
And you're right, Doug. And a lot of times for executives, the business planning starts in October timeframe, right? You may go through round one there and then round two, round three, et cetera. But then toward the last couple of weeks of the year, a lot of businesses are either dead or backed off, right? When does an executive get to take, or a business owner get to take actually 2 weeks off at the end of the year, right? You're doing the financials, dealing with the business, et cetera. So for me, it's a great time for people to have, one, reflections on this year, and just by yourself, whether you're at the office or at home or, someplace, and sit back and think, what worked well? What did I do well? Did I help others? Did I encourage the team? Were we better for our actions this year? And then I like to come back to the things that the company has, like your core values, your culture. Did I properly represent them to the employees, to the company, and to our customers? Yeah. And if not, that's core. And how can I do that better? How can I reinforce? Because this, what is it? 75, 80% of observations are not spoken. Maybe even higher. People see it through your actions. So what can I do to reinforce the kind of behavior for not only myself, but also, for the company and the people that I'm around?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's all a good point, and part of what I think about when I look at this process of doing a personal reassessment. I've actually written a couple articles on my blog about doing a SWOT type assessment at the personal level. We learn about SWOT in a business context. Looking at the company's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. But that applies personally too. And you can think of it in terms of your own leadership abilities, the impact you're having. Like you said, I love the way you put it, with your employees, with your customers, with the people around you. And even I'll include, family and friends. Are you being the spouse or father you need to be? Are you being the neighbor and friend you need to be? It's a great time to think about those kind of questions more so. And okay, if as you're doing that analysis, you say to yourself, I kind of let my eating habits go, so maybe I do need to go back to the gym and lose 10 or 15 pounds. All right, that's fine, but it has a tie to a much deeper and more significant purpose, I think, when you pick it up in that regard, and probably in most cases should give you a lot higher chance at success in doing it, because you've looked at this bigger picture and you've defined a more significant reason for doing it. It's kind of like redefining your why.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And I think it's other ways. A lot of times as the individual yourself, you sacrifice yourself for whatever. It could be your business, for your employees, for other people, right? But there's nothing more important than, making sure that you're also taking care of your family. And what I mean by that is making it a priority. Yeah, you can work 12, 14 hours a day, but what's that doing to your kids? And you come home at 8, 9 o'clock at night, your spouse has already put the kids to bed. So you may or may not get to see them to the weekend. I can guarantee you that has an impact. When the
Right.
kids looking up in the stands and saying, oh, wow, I get to, play first base today, or I'm on the basketball team, and they look up and say, where's dad? So it's about priorities and priority setting, and you can do it. And I encourage, leaders to look at that, because you never want to get to a point in your life where, hey, I've made an enormous amount of money, but who am I going to share it with?
Right.
And
Nobody
to
cares.
me, nobody cares.
Nobody
And to me, that's one of the strongest motivations. And it's hard as you're climbing the ladder or you're running your business. And I always circle back, what are you doing for yourself? What are you doing for your spouse? Turn off the phone. Do you need to take some time off? The world will continue spinning. But at the end of the day, it's about that core, it's that family.
Right. Well, a popular word that has emerged through the whole COVID experience is the word resilience. I know a lot of my clients, corporate and otherwise, are asking, what they're bringing to our session. They're just saying, "Man, I feel I'm on the brink of burnout. I'm tired, man. I've been running hard. I've been running fast and hot. Um, I've got this challenge and that challenge, and how do I, what do I do to recharge?" And this whole idea of resilience is that very question. What can you do to recharge? And, I think the answer is different for everybody. I mean, some
Mhm.
people say, well, if I can get back to the gym every day, that just energizes me. I mean, I confess I've never been a gym rat. I don't enjoy that. It's work. I generally enjoy the outcome, but I don't like the process for
Yeah.
doing that. So I have to do other things. I have to find other ways to get some physical activity, cardio, and other things done. And even if for me, even if it's just walking through the neighborhood, go out, take a walk. And doctors tell you walking could be just as good for you as some of that high intensity stuff. So the point is, find a way that works. If it's finding a quiet place and reading a book, well, great, good for you. If that works, if that's what helps recharge your battery and get that resilience going again. Leaders have to be resilient. If you're going to run a company or run a team, you've got to have that personal resilience. You just it's a given. If you're run down and you show up tired and fatigued and bad attitude, guess what? That's going to permeate the whole team. Everybody's going to start feeling that way pretty soon.
Well, I know that you're a pretty big personality assessment guy as well, Doug. And not all people understand or know what their perhaps energies are, or when that battery gets low. I know for me, for example, I've learned earlier in my career what those items are that I need to recharge and how to recharge. And if you don't know, you may do things like you said. Some people love to just take it easy and maybe read a book, or somebody loves to go on a walk. But guess what? There's other high energy people that their recharge point is, I want to go hiking. I want to climb a mountain. I want to go scuba diving or whatever. And if a person finds themselves in sort of that burnout stage or that rut, and they're not quite sure what that is, reach out. There's people like you, me, there's a lot out there, and identify some of these tools that can help you understand that. Because once you understand yourself better, then you can see the signals and the signs, right?
Exactly.
I'll give you an example. For me, I'm a very social person. I like being around people. I like to have conversations, but I have a certain amount of social energy And then when it's used up, I don't want to be around people. Man, just put me in a corner or off somewhere, because if I'm forced to be around people, I'm not happy and I'm not having a good time, and it doesn't portray that well. Okay. So I learned with myself, if I've got to do that because that's a requirement of the job, then I'll schedule, as an example, I may schedule time during the day and say, okay, I need a 30-minute recharge. Let me close the office door, turn out the lights. You can say meditate, you can sit there, whatever it is. And I know at the end of that time, I'm ready to go.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm fine.
Yeah.
And everybody's different. But if you don't understand that about yourself, you'll push yourself because you're told that's what you're supposed to do. And then what's the outcome? Burnout, right?
Well, and you do raise an important part of this. Too often I'll talk with a small business owner, and what they'll be describing is just in the phrases summed up by saying, "I don't have any time in the day. I'm just swamped. I've got so much going on." And I challenge them to say, "Well, all right, show me your calendar. What do you have on your calendar?" And the interesting thing is, for a lot of these guys that profess to be so incredibly swamped and busy, when you open up their calendar tool, usually it's Outlook, maybe it's Google,
Mm-hmm.
they don't have anything booked. It's white. It's just they are not being intentional about what they're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, they don't
So,
own their schedule, even though they're the boss
yeah.
of the company.
And I've done a small survey lately with my clients, and incredibly, the ones that complain the most about not having any time, when you ask them to show you their calendar, they don't even have anything booked on it. It's wide open. But that's kind of the way they're running their day. They just sort of walk into the office and say, "All right, hit me. What's going on?" There's no, I love the word intentionality, being intentional about, all right, at 8 o'clock, we're going to have this meeting and we're going to do this. Turn the page. Let's go to 9 o'clock. What are we going to do? 10 o'clock, so on and so on and so on. So I encourage those guys, number one, start calendaring this stuff.
Yeah.
Get your people used to claiming time on your calendar so you can focus on the things that are going on. But more importantly, back to the personal thing, block those hours. If you're trying to move some big mountains in your business, give yourself some time on your calendar to work that problem.
Yes. Yes. One of the things that is really worn out so many leaders is what they'll call, "Oh, I have the open door policy."
Yeah.
Right. It sounds great in theory, but here's what happens. People will drop by and have a conversation that fits their schedule. And you want to accommodate, you want to be nice, you want to try to help them out. But next thing you know, it's 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. And then your day gets caught up with things like that. You want to go grab a cup of coffee. Then what happens? People stop and ask you questions. "Oh, how are you doing? You're the boss." Oh, they want a few minutes of time. You get 4:30, 5 o'clock. You're like, I got a whole day's worth of stuff to do, and I haven't gotten to anything. So part of my conversations I'll have with leaders are, even if your day is booked, guess what? It's totally okay to focus on things like meeting management. Yeah, hey, this meeting's an hour. How do we cut it to 15 minutes? How do we focus on the top 3 issues?
Right.
And to that point, make something a priority, and then you can find a way to accomplish it. And then pick up 15 minutes here, 15 minutes there, block you off that time on your calendar where it's reflective. And one of the biggest people will see, a thing that I would do is, I love to have a nice cup of coffee. All right. But I was caught up at times, had such a big, busy schedule that I'm walking through the building and I'm going from meeting to meeting to meeting. And what I noticed was the energy that I'm portraying was a high sense of urgency. Oh, I'm busy. I got to go from one meeting to the next meeting. Well, employees that don't know what the meetings are about assume the worst, right? Oh, there's a problem. Yeah. Oh, why is he rushing from there to there to there? Am I in trouble? Is there a problem with the company, or things not going so well? So what I learned was take it slow, be purposeful. And if that's hard for you, grab a cup of coffee. Even if you don't drink coffee as much, guess what? It's pretty painful if you're walking fast and spill coffee on yourself. But it's just an example, of a technique to remind yourself that, hey, take it slower. It's okay. You're the boss. People feed off of you. And you want to portray yourself as confident, in control, and you're enjoying what you're doing. And, if that's not your life today, then how do you make purposeful changes, whether it's to the meeting managements, to the schedules, delegation, all the stuff that you and I talk about, Doug? Those are all things that once they put in place, it's amazing how much time they free up for themselves and the ability to leave at 5 to 5:30.
Right. You're right. And that's the whole point, is getting a grip on your own timeline. I use the analogy, we all have the exact same number of seconds in the day. And if you ask yourself the question, and love them or hate them, but I'll use them as examples, what's the difference between Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos versus you and me? It's ultimately all the difference is the way they choose to use their seconds in the day.
Mhm.
The intentionality that they've got of what they're going to do, what kind of meeting, what kind of message, what kind of dedication of time that they're going to deploy each waking second of the day. So anyway, I think that's just the thought back to the whole original subject, New Year's resolutions or not. Traditional resolution making, not a fan, but doing some deep dive personal assessment, personal planning, and reevaluation, I'm all about that. And I think it's one of the best recommendations I could share with anybody at this time of year, as you're thinking about how am I going to make the new year different. So I want to be cognizant of our time here. I do have a couple more subjects I think are important and want to share. The next one is maybe a little more gloom and dramatic, but hopefully not. And Rich, I know you hear this question with business owners that you deal with, and I certainly hear it. Everybody's talking about what's going on in the economy right now. Are we in recession? Are we not? Where are we going? If we are going to have a recession, when's it going to happen? How bad is it going to be? Yada, yada, yada. And for anybody that's been through some economic cycles with their business, there is a temptation when you start hearing the projected bad news in the economy, there's a temptation to somehow slim down, slow down, almost shut down, to kind of protect what you've got and sort of go on the defense about your business. And two thoughts that come to my mind immediately. Number one, I don't care who you talk to, nobody can agree on exactly what we've got going on right now. There are definitions of what makes a recession. There are historic indicators that tended in the past to indicate we hit a recession. The reality, as best I read it right now, is we're in a conundrum. We've got a lot of conflicting indicators between the classic measures that people normally think about. And, employment is the big one right now. Yes, some companies have announced some cutbacks and layoffs, but the economy in general, the unemployment rate is still low single digit. It's not double digit, and it's not even high single digits. It's not 8, 9, and 10. It's like, I don't recall the official one, 3 something. I think
it's like
was the last one.
3 or 4%, something like that. Yeah.
And yes, inflation is getting bad, and we see that in several sectors. Here in the Houston area, there's been a lot of press about the price of eggs. And
Hmm.
there's stories about people renting chickens so they can get their eggs. And I'm like, oh, goodness. Okay. Well, that's creative. I give them that. It's creative.
Yeah.
Um, but, my question is it truly really that bad? Or is that just media finding some, really flashy headlines to share with us? I don't know. So that brings me to my first
Mhm.
point. What do you do if you're running a business right now? What should you be doing in the face of all this stuff that's going on? Well, I may be naive, and if somebody wants to call me that, that's fine. But I say the number one thing you do is turn off mainstream media.
Amen.
You have more confusion than you have clarity by aligning news stories that are flying around about statements of where we are right now. You have a
Mhm.
much better barometer of how things are if you will go talk to your customers.
I couldn't have said it better. I think we all know that mainstream media, as well as social media, has become clickbait, right? Let's put things out there to get more eyeballs, to get you excited, to get you upset, whatever it is. Here's a reality. 3-4 years ago, our economy was booming. And then all of a sudden, and it was actually going very strong, which in and of itself has some concerns. And then all of a sudden a pandemic hits. Biggest shutdown in the history, of at least
Of the
any time.
world, really.
Yeah, in the world, right? And all of the inner relationships. And then you've got government funding that jumps in there, because anytime there's a shock to the economic cycle, there should be an extent of government funds to sort of recharge or re-kick off the economy, especially in the U.S., since we're consumer, so much dependent on consumer spending, and the rest of the world is dependent upon the U.S. spending. Give money out to citizens, and then what are they going to do? They're going to spend it.
Yeah.
And by spending it, it then recharges. So that makes sense. But then in certain areas, you can overspend, which can cause inflation, et cetera. So over the last, what I would say, 3 to 4 years, we've had massive swings that business owners, I mean, wow, their heads are spinning and should be. Boom to pandemic to recession, inflation. How do I stay on top?
Yeah.
And, my approach to it is, I love what you said, talk to your customers, because, some businesses are greatly impacted, right, with the economic, conditions. Others are benefiting and booming.
Right.
Maybe you need to pivot. And a lot of times, talk to your customers. I've always made a point of one of the most important aspects of my company was frontline customer service. They're talking to our customers. What are the customers asking for? And do we need to do a pivot? Is there additional service offering?
Yeah.
There's a lot of ways there. And I've always tried to take the approach is, can we benefit from what's going on? If the competition is, locking down, like you say, or not investing, tightening up budget, you know what I want to do? Increase marketing spend. I want to get the word out there that, man, we're doing great. And guess what? Call us.
Yeah.
And that confidence that you portray can bring more and more business, and you're allowed to come out of this even stronger than you were before.
Right. Well, and that brings me to my other thought on this, and I agree with you that this is time to, if you as a business owner are feeling pressure to make some cuts to try to create that defensive posture, I think that the challenge is looking at never cutting your core. whatever your
Mhm.
core business is about, you can't cut that core. It would be kind of the equivalent, just this might be a really oversimplified analogy, but it'd be the equivalent of going out to your vehicle in your driveway and taking off the front right tire and then say, "Oh, I can still drive just fine." Well,
Yeah,
you
you're right.
can't. If you've cut off that tire, your vehicle's not going to operate the same way. There's just no way. And the same thing is true in your business. So, yeah, if you want to make some assessments and look at your spend rate, you and I have a mutual friend, a lady who's done a neat job. She started this last year. She chose to go line for line through her budget and challenge and question, what is it we're spending in this area and why are we spending it?
Mhm.
And that's just good fiscal discipline, whether you're facing a recession or not. And I think last count I heard, I think she had identified about a 10% cost savings in things that were going on. And yes, companies that have been operating for a while have a way of evolving into those line items, and you find yourself, you might be paying double for something that you really don't need. And maybe it's a feature on your phone system. You got your core phone system, but now you paid for some add-on, and then 2 years later you found another thing and you added that on. Now you find out you got some redundancy, so okay, get rid of one of them, and they'll save you
Mhm.
some money. But yeah, I think you and I are aligned. I think the basic message right now is don't be afraid, but be smart.
Yeah.
And take a look. And when I said call your customers, I'm reminded my last service company, we existed prior to the true recession of '08. And when things started unraveling, it was actually in the fall of '07 for my business, because I ran a company that was related to the mortgage finance world. We weren't lenders, but we were service providers in that space. I had about 200 lenders across the country that were my customers. And the morning that Kramer went on his show and was waving his hands going, "It's Armageddon, it's Armageddon, Wall Street's shutting down and we're going to," I vividly remember it. I didn't
Mhm.
normally watch his show, but I just happened to dial in that day, and he was going crazy. I thought he was having a cardiac on air. And I knew some stuff had started happening in the mortgage business, so I immediately got on the phone and I called every CEO of those 200 companies that I had as clients. And in the course of about 4 days, I got a very clear picture painted. It was Armageddon.
Mhm.
It was bad. It was going to be bad. And nobody had a rosy, optimistic thought. People were saying things like, "I'm going all the way back to mom and pop status. It's just going to be me and my wife running this company. I'm letting everybody go. I can't make payroll because I don't have any volume. I don't have any transactions. I'm not making any new loans." Because there was a window there about 45 days. Wall Street did shut down to the mortgage finance business. You could not
Mhm.
get a home loan. And that was the first time nobody had ever experienced that before. And nobody knew how that worked. And we were all figuring it out. But, when the intelligence gathering tells you something like that, yeah, you can make some drastic decisions, but you can't do it with speculation. You can't sit there and think you've got a crystal ball. You need to go get hard, real market data. And I would argue there's no better place to do that than just simply call your customers.
Yeah, I agree with you. And just the fact of you calling your customers sends a message to them that you genuinely care. You
Yeah,
care about the relationship, you care about working with them. And a lot of times during those calls, they'll give you ideas.
right.
Well, this is what we're seeing, but you know what? Man, if you guys could do this or do that, it could really help us. Um, I give it when I was back in 2008, I was with a software company, and fortunately, it had been around for a number of years. But there was no net new sales for the entire year. They did have some recurring revenue like software maintenance and all that. And the executive team sat down together and said, okay, we got to make a choice here. Do we let employees go, which had never happened before in the history of the company? Or do we tighten our belts and find a way? And part of finding a way meant executives take pay cuts. Maybe employees do. Maybe some of the expenditures that we really enjoyed in the past. And I'll tell you, it got tight, but nobody was laid off. And when the cycle started turning back around, the competition had to regroup because they had scaled back. They didn't have the bandwidth. We were at full speed ahead. Yeah. And I know not all companies are in that position or have the ability. You know, if your entire lifeline goes away with no mortgages, you know, I'm sorry, if you're a person that, you know, your day job is dealing with mortgages, you know, not much you can do.
Yeah.
But that just sort of, you know, talking to your customers is one thing. I'm always been very transparent with employees and put it out there and say, hey, yeah, looks like we're going to be heading for some rough times.
Yeah.
And I would encourage you as an employee, look at your job, look at what you do on a day-to-day. Are there ways or ideas that we could accomplish the same for less?
Yeah.
We're not talking about, I always educate employees, you know, and let them know what's the true business that we're in. And how do we make revenue? And I'll talk to them and say, you know, hey, do you understand your job? Do you generate revenue or are you an expense item? And I'd always say, what do we do with revenue? We maximize revenue. What do we do with expenses? And most people will come back and say, oh, we, you know, reduce them. We cut expenses. No, we don't do that. That sends a bad message. We manage expenses. And when you turn it over to a lot of the frontline people, you may have somebody that comes back and says, well, you know what? We have this service that delivers, as an example, delivers water. And half the time they bring in stuff that we don't need. And I know the delivery charges. Guess what? I could stop by on the way. Or we could switch to Costco or somebody that could cut it by 25%. It may not be much, but what you've done is created ownership within all of the employees to say, you know what, we're in this thing together. Let's find a way.
Right. Really rally the team together.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I want to shift gears one more time before we totally exit this thing. And as I'm reading my notes, I'm thinking what I'm getting ready to say is really a visit back to topic number one, where we were talking about doing some self-management, personal assessment and everything. But the real theme of this topic is this idea of what we used to call work-life balance. And I have told clients, and I've spoken it on my podcast, that I am now a fan of a new phrase. I've abolished work-life balance as a thing. And I have gravitated to work-life harmony. And, you know, what we choose for our personal lives and what we choose for our work lives need to be in harmony with each other. The problem I had with the idea of work-life balance is balance in the literal sense is a picture of a scale and some equilibrium, and you got a plus to do minus, and you've got to, that's how you achieve balance, is giving and taking. And I don't think that's real anymore. And I think the way things in most businesses have gravitated because of our experience with COVID, combination of remote work, combination of new mindset about work, and where does my job fit into my overall landscape. I think as a leader, we have to do this for ourselves and we have to help our employees get here. And that is, let's talk about harmonizing everything because you're going to show up at work as one person, you're the whole, and WHOLE, whole. And as a leader, I can't really ask you to be something different. You are what you are, and I can appreciate challenges you may have personally, you know, at home and otherwise. And we need to work together to optimize what's going on. And if I realize you're not having a good day and I ask you, you know, hey, Rich, you don't seem yourself today. What's going on? And you tell me that your teenage son had a car wreck and you're not sure how that's going to happen and, you know, what all's going to come from that. Well, guess what? For the moment, it might be more important for you just to turn off what's going on at work and go figure that out. Go deal with that.
I agree, Doug. And you know, as we know, there's been such a shift in the work styles across a lot of the different generations. And when you and I were coming through, you know, a lot of times if it's a 12-hour day, we consider ourselves lucky, right? Oh, you want to work, you've got to work the weekends? Okay. You know, and that's just the way it was. Now, a lot of the younger employees, you know, their requirement is to work with a company that has your work-life harmony. And if it doesn't, they walk with their feet.
Yeah.
They won't tell you. And, you know, they just don't show up. And next thing you know, you get a text or you don't get a text. So we have to be mindful as leaders. What I've told my sons, because they're in the business world now, is that you may not agree with senior leadership, but it's best to understand where they came from, because they're also the ones that can impact your career, your advancement, and et cetera. Okay. But I also flip that back to the leaders. And I say, a lot of the younger generations today, it's not about making the most money. It's not about climbing the corporate ladder the fastest. It's a lot of times about, you know, I need that balance and I'll give you everything I got during my time frame. But after that, you know, it's about me. And those companies that are able to work that and create, you know, a great product and service that allows that harmony, like you're talking about, those are the ones that are going to be successful.
Yeah, I agree. And, you know, you raise a good point on the generational differences. And I've become known as a contrarian to most of my clients. When I have a client that's, you know, say in his 50s or even in his 40s, and he's saying, I don't understand my younger employees. It's such a frustration trying to connect with them and deal with them and talk with them. And, you know, they've already drawn the conclusion that they're just terrible and I need to do something different. I tell them, no, that's not the issue. You're looking at it wrong because if truth be told, dude, you know, Mr. 50-year-old, when you were 20, your 50-year-old boss didn't think you were all that special.
You're right.
And I promise you that. And, you know, it's all a matter of perspective. And I use the example, there's a text that I've read off to some people and I'll challenge them and I'll say, who do you think wrote this? And the answer I usually get is, well, that sounds like the Millennial Manifesto. And I'll say, well, surprise. It was Henry David Thoreau in 1863. He wrote this thing, and it was, as a young man, challenging the older generation, saying these guys don't get it. They're out of touch. They're way behind the times. They don't understand what I think and how I look at life. And, you know, this is now a problem. And so the takeaway from that in my book is simply we have had generational differences since the world began.
Mhm.
And as a leader, that is way too easy an excuse for you to not do your job.
Yeah.
And to say you're going to blame it on the generational differences is a cop out. It means you're not taking the time to invest in your people by learning what makes them tick. Okay,
Mhm.
they don't want to work the classic 9 to 5 deal. All right, we'll ask them what they will work and what they do, what does fuel their sense of work-life harmony. And I think in most cases, you're going to be pleasantly surprised at how incredibly committed they are to the work that they've come to do. And they will work extra when the need is there. You don't have to fear that. They're not going to just arbitrarily all the time punch out at 5 o'clock.
Mhm.
It's really not. There's no data anywhere that proves that. So it's all a matter of perspective coming from the leader.
And if you recall, and I'll put you on the spot, Doug, for our listeners. Okay. Today, what's the number one thing that attracts younger employees to a company?
That is a good question. I don't know that I have a specific answer for that.
Okay, so I did put you on the spot. Good.
Yeah.
That's always fun.
Stump the chump. I like it.
It's the culture.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
It's the culture of the company. And if they're aligned with the culture, then work-life balance doesn't become quite as hard. If they really believe in what the company is doing, then they find a way to get their job done.
Right.
And if it means, hey, I'm not going to let my boss down, I'm not going to let the company down, I'm going to log in. Yeah, I know it's 9 o'clock at night, but I've already put the kids to bed. I'm going to log in. Or maybe it's, yeah, my company is very cool. They allow me to work schedules. Guess what? I can come in at 7 o'clock in the morning because I want to go see, my son's T-ball game, and they're letting me do that. But that is so critical for companies today, and creating that kind of culture that is purposeful, it's demonstrated, the owners and leaders of the company follow it and follow the values of the company, which leads to the culture. It's a great way of overcoming some of the challenges with generational, because you've got alignment in the belief systems. And once you've got that, then it's just working through the details about, hey, are you going to work from home? Will this job allow you to work from home? If it does, how do we measure that the work's getting done? Not the hours that you're clocking in and out, but how's the work getting done? That kind of stuff is mechanics to me.
Right.
But attract those kind of employees, man, based on the culture, and you got a winning company.
And I'm embarrassed. I think when you asked me the question, I started overthinking it, but you're right. The culture is the key to it. And to that point, I was interviewing a guy the other day, or a few weeks back, and he's on my podcast. He's got a very interesting new approach to recruiting and placement. So he's a staffing agency, and one of the things he told me while we were talking, he said he had a prospective client company come to him and said, "Hey, I got this slate of jobs I want to fill. Want to hire you to help me do that?" And the guy said, "All right, great. Tell me about it." And the business guy led off and said, "Well, we have gone back to full-time in the office. It's 8 to 5 in the office, and that's one of our requirements." And this recruiter said, "I'm out."
Yeah, game over.
He said, "Non-starter, I'm out." And is that even negotiable? And the business guy said, "No, we really want everybody back in the office." And this recruiter said, "That's not reality in today's market. I can tell you right now, I can't fill those jobs."
Good for him.
And he said, "I don't care what you're going to pay or what the job title is. I can promise you I cannot fill a single one of those jobs. I'm not going to take your money. We're not even going to start. I'm not going to waste my time."
Good for him.
And I thought, yeah, that's very indicative of where I think we are now. And I
Yep.
think it is a radical shift in the workforce for sure.
And our conversations about the owner of the company, the leaders of the company being purposeful, because you can create a company that people want to work at. And, how can you accommodate? So is it, I can't go 100% working remote, but I can go 3 days a week.
Right.
Does that work for you? Or I can
Right.
adjust schedules. There's ways of doing that will really attract the right kind of employees. They just got to understand times have changed.
Yeah, they have.
Yeah.
And Rich, I tell you what, on that note, I think we're going to wrap this up. I know it was a kind of a maiden voyage. We will have a recording of this out there, and I do want to tell everybody that may capture the recording at a later date. We are going to again be doing this every month. So third Tuesday of the month at 2 p.m. Central. Would love to have you join in for our open session here. We'll have new topics and new ideas next month. So, Rich, thank you for sitting in, man. It really always a pleasure to get together and break bread and have a talk. So,
always a blast, Doug. Thanks for having me. And I encourage the listeners to join you next time. And if they hadn't subscribed, hit your podcast. Top notch #1. So,
yeah. So, just for clarity's sake, I've alluded to it, but I haven't mentioned the name. The show on the podcast is called Leadership Powered by Common Sense. We're on all the major streaming channels as well as a video version over on YouTube. And the channel there is the same name, Leadership Powered by Common Sense. And if you want to get hold of me specifically, hop over to my website. It's real easy to follow, dougthorpe.com. And Rich, your website, you want to tell everybody?
Is richhallgroup.com. There's a QR code on the video. It'll take you right to it. And love to hear your comments.
Likewise. Well, for now, everybody, we're going to sign off, say goodbye, have a great day, and go out there in the world, make a big difference. Bye-bye.